The sky was a burning canvas of fire and smoke when they pushed her out. The roar of the helicopter blades tore through her ears, drowning the screams, the chaos, and even her own thoughts. For one fleeting second, the world slowed down. Her body suspended between life and death, the ground hundreds of feet below rushing toward her like an unstoppable wave. They had thrown her out believing she wouldn't survive, believing that gravity would finish what betrayal had started. But they didn't know who she really was. They didn't know that Rangers don't need parachutes to survive. Sergeant Maya Cross had lived her entire life defying expectations. The daughter of a mechanic and a nurse from a small town in Oklahoma, she had joined the Army not for glory, but because she believed some battles were worth standing up for. When she became one of the first women to complete the U.S. Army Ranger School, they called her crazy. They said she wouldn't last a month, but she did, and more. She became a legend in the making, a soldier whose resilience was whispered about in every training camp and base she stepped into. But legends are dangerous. They attract both admiration and enemies. Her final mission wasn't supposed to go like this. Operation Iron Veil, a deep extraction behind enemy lines, had been designed to rescue an intel officer captured in the highlands of Korak Province. A straightforward mission, or so she was told. But in war, nothing is ever straightforward. The moment they lifted off, something felt wrong. Her team, or rather the men assigned to fly with her, kept exchanging glances. She wasn't part of their inner circle. They resented that command, had put a ranger in charge of their operation, and worse, that the ranger was a woman. As the helicopter ascended into the smoke-choked dawn, she caught the reflection of one of them loading his rifle, not toward the ground, but toward her. She didn't flinch. She'd seen that kind of hatred before, not on the battlefield, but within her own ranks. The kind that's quiet, cowardly, and dangerous. She locked eyes with him, her hand tightening on the harness. Then it happened. A shove. A sudden scream. The wind tore through her as her body was thrown into the open air. The ground spun wildly below. Her breath caught. For a second, the weight of betrayal pressed harder than gravity ever could. She wasn't afraid of dying, but of being forgotten, of letting their treachery erase everything she had fought for. The cold air bit into her skin as she fell, her mind racing faster than her heartbeat. Years of training kicked in. She angled her body, using her arms to cut through the air, forcing herself into a controlled free fall. She knew how to survive. She knew where they were, and what was below. The hills weren't soft, but she wasn't aiming for soft. She spotted the river, narrow, fast, deadly, the kind that could shatter bones or save lives. With a final twist, she threw herself toward it, hitting the water like a bullet. Pain exploded through her body. Then, blackness. When she woke, it was to the sound of silence. The helicopter was gone. The world around her was eerily still, an endless expanse of mist, rock, and forest. Every bone in her body screamed, but she was alive. Barely. She dragged herself out of the river, coughing up mud and blood. Her arm hung uselessly, dislocated. Her uniform was shredded, soaked in red. She didn't have gear, no radio, no weapon, just the echo of betrayal and the will to survive. For the next 2 days, she moved like a ghost. Every step was agony, every breath a battle. She scavenged what she could, broken branches, stones, water from the river. When night fell, she pressed herself against the cold rock, listening to the sounds of distant movement. The enemy patrols were close. She could hear them speaking in hushed tones, searching. They had found the wreckage of the helicopter and the bodies of the men who had betrayed her. The irony was brutal. Something had gone wrong after they threw her out. Maybe the storm hit, maybe karma finally did its job. But all of them were dead. All except her. On the 3rd day, the pain began to fade into something else. Focus. She fashioned a crude sling, set her arm against a branch, and kept moving. Her mind went quiet. The ranger in her took over. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was hunting. She began to piece together what had happened. The mission was compromised before it began. Someone had sold their location, and the men she trusted had been part of it. But they underestimated her. They thought throwing her out of a helicopter would be enough. They didn't know that the ground itself favored those who never quit. By the 5th day, she found the remains of a camp. Empty, abandoned, but scattered with maps and gear. She patched herself up with torn fabric, used the light from a broken flare to sterilize a wound, and marked her path toward the extraction zone. Every hour felt like a lifetime, but she refused to stop. She wasn't walking for herself anymore. She was walking for every woman who had ever been told she wasn't strong enough. For every soldier betrayed by those who wore the same uniform. When she finally reached the ridge overlooking the valley, she saw it. The extraction chopper circling low, searching. She stumbled into the open, waving a flare she had salvaged. The pilot saw her. The helicopter descended, and a crewman leaned out, eyes wide in disbelief. "That's impossible," he whispered, his voice carried away by the blades. "We were told she didn't make it." But she had. Because Rangers don't fall, they rise. When she returned to base, there were whispers. Eyes that once looked down on her now looked away in shame. The report spread like wildfire. The Lone Ranger who survived after being thrown from the sky. The investigation that followed uncovered the betrayal, the forged mission orders, the cover-up. She testified not for vengeance, but for truth. She stood in front of the panel, uniform torn, scars still fresh, and said quietly, "You can throw me from the sky, but you'll never break what I stand for." Months later, she returned to training new recruits, silent, strong, and unshaken. The same woman who had fallen from a helicopter now taught others what it meant to never give up. The story of Sergeant Maya Cross became more than a report. It became a legend, whispered in mess halls and during night watches. A story soldiers told when they needed courage. Because in the end, it wasn't about how she fell, it was about how she rose. And sometimes that's what life is, being thrown down by those you trusted, left in the dark, bleeding, broken, and still finding the strength to rise again. Because survival isn't just a skill, it's a decision. If this story touched your heart, if it made you feel something deep inside, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs to remember that strength isn't about never falling. It's about never staying down. Special request. Tell us in the comments, what does never giving up mean to you? Because somewhere out there, someone might need to read your words today.